Hi guys, welcome to TJ's View, and our topic for today is mass manipulation. If you're just joining us on this channel, welcome to TJ's View. Check around, saw the vibe. Like, what do you think? Do you like this video? Do you like other videos? I mean, you cannot know because you're just starting, but just check around, and see the vibe and energy here. If you like it, if you want to be part of the community, and whatever. So 1 million cents for the word are going to be budgeted into this video. Yeah, over. So now let's get into today's video: mass manipulation. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. There will be mentions of violence, racism, homophobia. If you find such topics uncomfortable, please feel free to clock out and join us again on topics you're more comfortable with. Or you can just skip through because I'm going to try to put like timestamps. So yeah. So to move on to other things like going on around the world, to give like a little bit of context to things that are happening constantly at the moment. One of the things I would like to mention is the I'll put the word on the screen because I don't want to be flagged or censored by anybody. So this particular word, yeah, it is the deliberate and systematic destruction of a group of people based on their ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality. So the United Nations definition basically chalks it up to mean any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. These acts include spying members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions to bring about the group's destruction, e.g., like starvation, forced displacement, etc., and also preventing birth within the group, like the forced sterilization that was going on for like black women in certain countries and is even still going on till today, and also forcibly transferring children to another group. Like now, let's get into how like the foreign news is are like being framed differently by different people. Now that we know the meaning of the G word, like it can help you to understand how to feel about the news articles and how they frame it basically. So one, we have like the mass spying of Gaza, which is the G word going in Gaza right now, and how the Western media framed it basically. So this headline is selected from the Anadolu agency. 1 year of Gaza's G word. Pro-Israel bias pervades Western media, says experts. Analyst Rizwan Hamid from the UK's Centre for Media Monitoring criticizes Western media for using emotive languages for Israeli victims, downplaying Palestinian civilian deaths, and repeatedly framing coverage around Israel's right to defend itself. So there's an article, I'll put that in the link also. Like, just check it basically. Then in contrast, this is leaked from the New York Times, and this is like one of their guidance or their guidelines. Allegedly, allegedly, because I'm broke, I cannot be sued. Allegedly, this is leaked from allegedly the New York Times. The New York Times internally advised reporters to avoid terms like allegedly, as I said, like ethnic cleansing and occupied territory and refugee camps, basically, in their articles when reporting on Gaza, arguably diluting the depiction of Palestinian suffering. So, coverage. CNN and BBC are Western pro Israel bias in Gaza reporting, and their ideology is more towards the center to center right, basically. They are more like center than to like towards, they lean towards the right also. So Um, some of the biased examples are journalists revealed that CNN aired Israeli propaganda unchallenged, e.g., a hospital visit segment presenting a simple calendar as a Hamas prisoner roster. Despite internal corrections that were ignored, advocating peace.com. Okay, so basically, that is for the CNN. Then for the BBC, way they the way people accuse them or see them as being more like pro-Israelis is because like of the disparity, the way they try to like minimize the use of words like the G word in their articles because they want to soften. I cannot tell you their intention basically, but practically what I can tell you is the reducing the use usage of those words in your articles soften the impact of the news on your listeners. Like can it can reduce the intensity of what is going on basically. So the left side and their biased examples towards like the BBC. So a watchdog report found BBC mentioned the G word about Israel 14 times more than Hamas and avoid labeling Hamas as terrorists in Arabic language programming. And that's by the New York Post.com. So BBC accused of breaching its editorial guidelines associated Israel with the G word 14 times more than Hamas. Hamas is the so to put that into perspective basically. So I'm going to put the news article down in the comment section. Biased example. Leaked internal memos instructed journalists to like for the New York Times, right? Allegedly. Biased examples. Leaked internal memos instructed journalists to avoid the G word, ethnic cleansing and occupied territory, and analysis showed terms like massacre were used 60 times more for Israeli than Palestinian deaths. So that's like on the practically the summary to that is that um, the right or the lefts. Okay, so we're going to talk about racism and how the media sometimes like frames racism, like for each different ideology, basically. Um, I'm going to start with an example, that is leaning about the current Palestinian war that is going on and the G word that is going on in Palestine. I'm going to put the word up here, like because reports highlight that Western media refer to the conflict as Israel to Hamas war, marginalizing terms like ethnic cleansing or occupation, describing Israeli civilian deaths as slaughter or massacre far more frequently than Palestinian deaths. Example is Israeli victims described using such terms over like 70% more, emphasizes Israel's right to defend at a 5:1 versus Palestinian rights. So like practically this is talking about how some news outlets are more to like make emphasis on Israel victims, Israeli victims over like Palestinian victims, and they are more likely to use like stronger words to evoke some kind of reaction when they're talking about Israel victims more than if they're talking about Palestinian victims. So we have racism in coverage basically. Western news outlets, crime coverage bias ideology, mainstream US media, New York Times, and I don't know what WAPO is, but I'm going to put that in the WAPO. I don't know why I wrote WAPO and I didn't write the full name in my research, but WAPO, that's what I wrote. So, biased examples. Studies show black defendants are depicted with criminal imageries. Example, mugshots in 45% of cases versus 8% for whites. And white victims are 4 times more likely to be shown with family, you know. And I'm going to put the article or the page up. So like down in the description, sorry. So another example of racism is like the New York Times, and like the dehumanizing languages they use while reporting in the Middle East. And an example of this is New York Times. A New York Times column by Thomas Friedman compared Middle Eastern to parasites and insects, criticized, but it was criticized as racist because it is racist to call people of another tribe or another group parasite and insect. That's racist. Like I don't need to explain why that is right. Anyways, now I'm moving on to like homophobia basically. We're going to be talking about how the Nigerian media representation and some other things, anyways. So, Media Diversity Institute reports local Nigerian media often portray LGBTQ plus people with dehumanizing languages, implicitly encouraging discrimination. Journalist Matthew Blaze states, from the African media, it has been highly unethical, biased, and complicit in the homophobia that LGBTQ plus people are faced in Africa. Article in the description, obviously. So AP News on church violence. AP reports on deadly violence in Nigeria linked to an internal church schism over LGBTQ plus policies, where coverage often focused on religious factionalism, risking minimalization of homophobic motivations. So what all of this mean? All this big English is just saying that the way it is portrayed in the news sometimes can make the news can downplay the church's like homophobic actions and like prioritize religion and how it doesn't match the religious belief over how a human being actually got hurt. Okay, so let's assume like in a case where a church is trying to do like a deliverance to deliver someone from the spirit of homosexuality, which does not exist actually. That's something that is not possible. Like you cannot deliver someone from the spirit of homosexuality because there is no spirit of homosexuality. But this is just an example because this actually happened in Nigerian churches. So like let's say in a case where a church is trying to deliver someone from the so-called spirit of homosexuality, and the way they are going to do that is by dunking the person in water, you know, pouring candles on the person to burn the spirit out, and even flogging the person because some churches be flogging the person out. And let's say in this scenario, right, the person that is being treated this way grows sick and maybe collapse or something because of the abuse that has been inflicted upon them. The media is not going to portray that the church was abusive towards this individual. They are instead going to say that, oh, the church was just trying their best to, straighten up the person to fit the religious beliefs instead of actually just saying what happened. Oh, a church abused somebody. Basically, that's what happened. But no, they are going to frame it like separately. And if you read an article that is framing like this topic separately, like the way you're going to interpret the news is going to be different. Based on what media outlets you are reading from, basically. Which is why I said like you should actually prioritize checking your media outlet and what ideology they stand with, so oh, is this person like, or just even you know actually checking like, oh, this news article I'm reading, this particular thing that happened, how do other like media outlets frame it, just to rid yourself of some biases, basically. Anyways, so back on that, while specific Nigerian cases are less documented online, global patterns include like the center right outlets may frame LGBTQ plus rights negatively by emphasizing religious or conservative views. Basically, that's the right wing. Then the liberal outlets, which is the left wing, typically highlight the discriminatory practices and human rights violations. Like in this case where I was talking about is being abused, because I'm a left wing person. I'm a left chicken wing. Anyways, let's go on. So the central media would often use neutral language but may still omit like LGBTQ plus voices and focus on the controversy instead. So just to summarize what we've been talking about like before, like framing biases, like different topics are the framing biases. So words like the G word can be softened or soft pedaled in the media, and they would use terms like, they'll use softer terms to just make it more, what's it called, palatable for people, and to make it less, oh my god, that is happening, but more, oh, I mean, we are sending them thoughts and prayers, you know, instead of, using the right words to make people actually react the way they should react, like, okay, this is crazy, we need to do something about it. We actually need to come together as a society and do something about it. But no, when they use the softer word, it's more like, oh, it's a war. Instead of it's a G word, they'll say it's a war. And when it's a war, it's more like, oh, now that's the problem between two countries. It's not anybody's business. But when it's the G word, they know that, oh, people are more likely to, like, okay, what's going on in that part of the world? What can we do to support and stuff? So, anyways, also racism, right? They selectively use like emotive terms that highlight like Israeli suffering and downplays Palestinian suffering, like in the article, like in the topic I was talking about earlier on, and also homophobia, right? Using demeaning descriptors normalizes like discrimination against LGBTQ plus in Nigeria. So yeah, why this matters? Language controls perception. That's on to say. So words like Laura versus dirt evoke vastly different emotional responses. Like if you say, "Oh, she slaughtered 20 chickens and 20 chickens died," the way people are going to view that is going to be different. So then she slaughtered 20 chickens, like someone is committing another violence against other people, but death, like 20 chickens died, is more like, oh, what killed them? They died. Okay, like you are more likely to not react as much or to be more curious. Like that's just an example of how words can be softened. Then we also have things like whose rights like get amplified more in the media. Like often media sympathizes with dominant or Western aligned groups basically. Like when something is happening, nobody is perfect. There's no perfect victim and there's no perfect perpetrator practically. Like no one is perfect. But when the Western media is like recording news, they are more likely to like portray the Western aligned countries as like, you know, the good one in the media. Contrary to what could actually be the case. They could be the good one, but they could also be the bad one. So framing influences policies and empathy basically. How we feel about a story shapes public pressure and political actions. So, or everything we've been saying, how does it impact audiences? So, one, desensitization. Repetitive use of neutral or passive languages for victim reduces emotional resonances with like people basically. Then policy effects. Biased reporting shapes public opinion and can sway political support or intervention. Human cost. Underreporting of atrocities delays international response, allowing atrocities to persist without consequences. So now that we have an idea of how things work, how will you view the media, moving forward? Will you make an effort to check out news from different ideologies before forming your permanent opinion on topics? Or and just let me know how you guys are going to think, when you're listening to media going forward. All I'm going to say is this video might be a mess because the way a lot was going on during the recording of this video. So the cutting is going to be a fucking mess. But I'll try to like make it as organized as possible. So basically, the examples I gave in today's video was just to like show you how media can frame news separately and how it can affect or like trigger things in you or not trigger things in you, even though it should actually be triggering something in you. I'm not like anyways, so just let me know what you guys think about this particular topic. Would you like to hear me talk a little bit more on political things, because we are doing such a commentary, like politics is part of society, or would you just let me to focus more on the softer things like marriage, love, relationship, and the other things that go on in Nigerian society? And also I'm actually thinking of getting on Nigerian Twitter. I know, bad idea, right? But I think instead of Reddit series, we should actually do like Nigerian Twitter instead, because like Nigerians are more on Twitter than they are on Reddit. So, what do you guys think? Anyways, thank you for listening to the end of today's video. I know it's gonna be chaotic. It's gonna be a chaotic watch. So if you watch the end of this video, I really, really deeply appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please don't cancel me. Seriously, I'm not trying to like say any news that is better than the other or any ideology is better than the other. And I already told you guys from the start that I'm actually biased myself, like because I already have like a political ideology I follow, and you guys can probably tell from any of all my videos, basically. So like, anyways, I was transparent basically. So don't come for me and don't set fire up my ass. Thank you. So it was nice being with you guys today. Thank you. Bye.